Don't forget, some things mustn't be forgotten. The shadow hunting me. I live in London what have I done? This is crazy. Don't forget. Don't forget. I must stop him. Focus. My name is... I am Daniel.
Hi, my name is Thomas Grip, and I'm one of the co-founders of Frictional Games. I worked with engine code, gameplay code, design, and many other things for Amnesia. In my commentaries, I will mainly focus on the design behind the different parts of the game. I hope you'll enjoy them. This is one of the first levels that we created for the game, and it was initially part of the archives level, which we will reach in a bit. Amnesia started out with a pretty different design, and when we redesigned it, the maps did not fit. This caused us to split them up and scatter them out. So in the first design, after this corridor, the archives level was supposed to follow, and the room lying there now was built much later. In fact, the first designs did not have Daniel waking up with an amnesia at all, and it was actually added later on. In the first story draft, Daniel still had hidden memories, but he was unaware of this at the start of the story. However, as we redesigned things, we found the waking up with amnesia thingy, although a bit cliché, much more fitting.
Hi there, my name is Luis Robert. I must be a true programmer, never scripted at times, and perhaps the main reason why the rest of the core team at Fictional Games is pretty much forced to speak English at our internal meeting, as I am the only non-Swede here. Now, what a Spaniard is doing with a bunch of Swedish guys is a whole different story we won't be discussing today. By the way, I will be talking mostly about tools and scripting. Hope you like it.
Hello everyone, my name is Mikael, and I'm the writer for Amnesia, The Dark Descent.
19th of August, 1839. I wish I could ask how much you remember. I don't know if there will be anything left after I consume this drink. God willing, the name Alexander of Brandenburg still invokes bitter anger in you. If not, this will sound horrible. Go to the inner sanctum, find Alexander, and kill him. His body is old and weak, and yours, young and strong. He will be no match for you. One last thing. A shadow is following you. It's a nightmare, breaking down reality. I have tried everything, and there is no way to fight back. You need to escape it as long as you can.
I think we can all feel the story kick-starting as we finish the letter from Daniel. The game itself is just filled with confusion, and I think we're really doing the player a service keeping it simple in the beginning. Basically try to take your revenge on Alexander, that is the premise of the game. You don't really need to dive any deeper than that, but hoping that the player will care about the story, they have the entire game in front of them to decide if they think killing Alexander is justified or not.
Hello, my name is Mark Nikander. I'm a 3D artist and level creator at Fictional Games. I started out as a helper during Penumbra Overture, and I was finally hired as a full-time artist in the later part of Penumbra Black Plague.
I don't believe I have. Is it connected to the... what did you call it?
The inner sanctum. My most precious chamber, Daniel. And it lies well beyond the refinery. In fact, it lies beneath the very stone of Brandenburg.
This is one of the many hub levels in the game, and this is a design concept that we started out with in Penumbra. The idea is to give the player some freedom on where to go, but at the same time give a clear objective. In this level, the slime obstacle is a thing that the player needs to get past, and all other levels then have things needed to do so. The slime itself is one of the few puzzles left from the initial designs, and the one I'm probably the least proud of.
Scattered throughout the game, you can see some signs written in Latin. The reason for using it is that it was considered a language of culture and science, as most scientific and philosophy authors wrote their works and treatises in it. As we are dealing with a castle dwelled by a pretty smart guy that has been around since the Renaissance period, Latin all around the place was something we should expect. Being the only guy in the team that had a direct contact with Latin, in high school to be more precise, well, it was kind of logical that any translation to be done would have my name on it. Translating stuff into Latin was kind of strange and fantastic to do. At first I had a classic Latin dictionary, so if I had to translate any modern term, I would have to track its etymology down to the Latin equivalent, or look for a synonym or similar expression that had a direct translation. Then I had the luck to come across some dictionary for modern stuff online that addressed most of this stuff for a huge lot of terms, so it couldn't have come in a better time. The particle editor is also a fine part of the tool bundle, and it is what we use to create particle effects for maps and events. We use particles to do nice effects like the flames in torches and the smoke that comes out from them. All we have to do is add one or more particle emitters, set up some parameters like starting position and speed, on all sorts of size, color or speed. It's funny how you can simulate all kinds of effects with such simple elements. I very much recommend you to try it yourself.
In early concepts, this was meant to be a sort of wine testing room and directly connected to the wine cellar. The reason for the whole wine testing thingy was that we planned on having more laboratories in later levels, so a lab here as well felt kind of strange. Then things changed and only one lab was left in the design, so we changed the name to laboratory instead. The whole wine testing facility that got to make dangerous acid always felt kind of strange anyways.
Let me see. And one part aquafortis.
In early concepts,
If you haven't followed our development blog back when it started, you might have missed one of the biggest changes in our production pipeline. 2 years back, we started a toolset site project to speed up the creation of content for the game. I'd say the level editor, which is what we, or more specifically James, Mark and Marcus, have used to build all the halls and corridors you are walking through right now, is the big start of the pack. Its workings in a nutshell, while all the models and assets are actually made in software like Maya or Blender, everything geometry-wise in
16th of May, 1839. Later that eve, tomorrow.
To finish this little overview of our tools, I must mention the material editor, available both standalone and built into the other editors. The program itself is very simple to use. You have some material types defined by the engine, and you can throw in textures to be used for diffuse, normal maps, height maps, as well as some variables to control specific parameters for a material type. When I was writing it, I could just stare while the preview model rotated around itself and the parallax mapping effect was on when testing, just for fun. Another piece of the toolset is the model editor, used to create the entities you are interacting with while playing. Basically, we take a model and set up some parameters like physical bodies, joints, and user-defined variables. We can also attach sub-entities to them, like lights, particle systems.
7 today.
When an entity is finally set up, it is ready to be placed in a level using the level editor. Examples of entities here are doors, lamps, most furniture, critters.
This level was changed a lot, and I think it's one of the most tweaked levels that we got. Not only was it part of the big archives level that we had to split up, but it was also hard to get it engaging enough. The problem here is that we don't have any sort of fun mechanic that we rely on to make the game engaging. Instead, we rely on story, atmosphere, and environment. This is true for many other levels and the game as a whole, but these were kind of one of the larger levels that we made, and also one that didn't have much puzzles and such. So when testing it, we quickly get bored with it, and we wanted to add more spooky events to spice it up. But then later on, testing proved that these events weren't that necessary, and we also felt that they were a bit lame and not fitting, so we decided to remove them. Then the back part of the level, we wanted to make that a more linear experience, with the current player getting trapped and all, forcing the player to solve the destroy wall and find secret door puzzles. Previously, testers often missed that they can solve these problems. The level is now very different from the early designs.
When I started writing, I had only outlined the framework for the story and the first few levels in the game design document, so I ended up finalizing a lot of material for the first levels, and then when those were done, we planned out the last 2/3 or so. This had a funny effect since I had to not only cater to the story, but to stay true to the stuff I've written for the first levels. Usually you can go back and forth while writing and change things, but if you have already recorded voices, you really shouldn't because of the costs. So the first text really shaped the rest of the material in an interesting way, and made them matter in a way I hadn't thought about. I really like how the This thickens the story elements as I am able to jump back into the material and keep using and reinforcing certain concepts. Agrippa is of course the most extreme effect of this method, which grew from a small reference to becoming one of the most important characters in the game.
Shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light. It was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light. I reached out, closing it in my hands. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirit me away. Spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. The next thing I can remember is the grating sound of stone being lifted, the voices of the Arabs pulling me to safety, and grasped firmly in my hands was the broken pieces of a most peculiar relic.
You have to be swift when you activate the first one. You hear that? If it stops, you'll have to start over.
Isn't all this a bit excessive?
You can never be too careful, Daniel.
This level was changed a lot, and I think it's one of the most tweaked levels that we got. Not only was it part of the big archives level that we had to split up, but it was also hard to get it engaging enough. The problem here is that we don't have any sort of fun mechanic that we rely on to make the game engaging. Instead, we rely on story, atmosphere, and environment. This is true for many other levels.
To finish, this little overview of our tools, I must mention the Material Editor, available both standalone and built into the other editors. The program itself is very simple to use. You have some material types defined by the engine, and you can throw in textures to be used for diffuse, normal maps, height maps, as well as some variables to control specific parameters for a material.
A major design guideline for us was to give each level a unique theme, something that all puzzles, events, and the general atmosphere was built upon. This makes each level a little piece of the story and theme at large, and also gives them focus so the player is not distracted with too much information. The theme in this level is the strange creatures that lurk in the castle. The player first spots them momentarily in archives, so now is the perfect place to build some fear. There is never any real threat in this level, but it's much darker than any before, and there's a constant pressure with boards creaking and the like. The flashbacks also give hints of where the strange creatures come from, making all events focused on the level's central theme.
What's happening? Oh, feels like my chest is going to burst.
My God! Wilhelm, do...
Accept it. We're not getting out of here.
How can you say that? Alexander, you piece of shit! Let us out of here! It shouldn't be.
In early concepts, this was meant to be a sort of wine testing room and directly connected to the wine cellar. The reason for the whole wine testing thingy was that we planned on having more laboratories in later levels, so a lab here as well felt kind of strange. Then things changed and only one lab was left in the design, so we changed the name to laboratory instead. The whole wine testing facility that could make dangerous acid always felt kind of strange anyways. This level was first called Distillery, and if you check the data file, it's still named as such. Now, for some reason I told Mikken, our writer, that it was called Refinery, and the voiceover was recorded with the wrong name. Since it's easier to change a name than a piece of voice data, we had to rename it. I'm glad I said Refinery though, and not King's Hall or Grandma's Vegetable Patch. That would not have been as fitting.
Keep going straight, and make sure not to stray.
I found my journal. But yes, Smith.
We added stuff to the puzzle perhaps 4 or 5 times because after each test session we kept having testers that did not see the piece of wood that you are to break to complete the puzzle. Originally you could only break it, so we added the option to pull it out as well. Then we added a faint light to draw the attention to it and also tweaked the description of the crank. After that we added so that when you pull the crank there is a bit of dust falling from the piece of wood, and we also did a slight change in the angle of the piece of wood and changed the color and the texture, all to make it as notable as possible. So, the question is, did you notice the piece of wood?